Just bear with me. I'm gonna just do something I forgot to do. Okay. Come back. So sorry about that. I was just sharing to the group because I didn't set it up correctly. So good morning. Monday morning, 5 minutes late this morning. Apologies about that. Today's lesson, I want to maybe be a little playful and explore specific aspects of kind of how we move in general. And one of the ways that I want to explore that is by looking at one of the fundamental aspects of our ability to move well, and that's the organization of our pelvis. So today's lesson is going to explore that organization a little bit. On Saturday, I was going to teach a pelvic clock lesson, and I think that those lessons maybe need a bit more preparation and planning. Because I don't think I gave people enough time to subscribe to it, because I got a lot of contact afterwards, but no people actually on the day. So if anyone's interested in coming to either my Monday evening sessions or my Saturday afternoon sessions, just give me a shout and I can give you all the details that you need. Those are hour-long lessons, whereas these ones are short kind of introductory lessons. All right, so the first thing I'd like you to do is sit back in your chair. Sit back in your chair, if that's possible for you. So sit in a position that you would sit when you were not doing anything, maybe relaxing, watching the TV, and just notice in that position how you are organizing your pelvis. What's the position of the pelvis? And if you can, if it's possible for you, just very gently, if you can, just rock the pelvis slightly backwards and rock the pelvis slightly forwards. So when I mean forwards and backwards, what I'm talking about is the position of the pelvis. If this is the position of the pelvis, as you're sitting backwards in your chair, you just want to rock the pelvis slightly backwards. So you're going more onto the back of the pelvis, and then rock the pelvis slightly forwards very gently, just to feel what movement is available to you in that sitting back position. Once you've done it a couple of times, come back to a normal position, how you would sit maybe at the beginning of one of these lessons. So often we talk about sitting on the sitting bones. So if that's something that you know how to do, if you can organize yourself to sit on the sitting bones, and then very gently just begin to rock your pelvis backwards and slightly forwards, and notice the difference. What's the difference in availability of this movement from when your pelvis is really sitting back, or you're sitting back and your pelvis is maybe tilted slightly backwards? Good. And then once you've done it a few times in your normal sitting position, can you lean forwards completely so that you, as if you were going to reach down towards the floor, for example? If you can organize yourself to pick up a pencil from the floor, or whatever's possible or comfortable for you to do in that organization of the body. And in that position, if you can stay there for a moment, of course, staying within your comfortable range, if you can stay there for a moment, can you rock the pelvis in that position? Just notice as you rock the pelvis in that position, what's more easy? Is the tilting of the pelvis forwards more easy, or is the tilting of the pelvis backwards more easy? If any of these instructions aren't clear, just write in the comments and I can clarify them. Good. So once you've done it a couple of times in that position, just come back to the neutral position of the pelvis. so that you feel that you're sitting roughly on your sitting bone. And from the diagram behind me, you can see the sitting bone is here, just at the bottom of the pelvis. And if you look at the middle picture, you can see that the sitting bone is organized very close to the where the leg is in standing. So the weight generally will come down through this point, regardless of whether you are in sitting or in standing. However, some of us do have habitual positions. So, for example, if I take myself as an example, the orientation that I have of my pelvis habitually is slightly tilting forwards. This means that I have a bit of extension in my lower back, and that's what they call lordosis. So everyone will have their kind of own individual habitual body position. But what that means is that as I kind of sit into a more neutral position, then I have a tendency to come forward into a forward tilt, and going backwards into a backwards tilt is less habitual for me. So as you sit in the middle, and just very gently, I'd like you just to do a small amount, just tilt your pelvis slightly forwards. And then once you've tilted it forwards, maybe you can do that a few times, tilting the pelvis forwards. And then once you've done it a few times, tilt the pelvis very gently backwards. And just notice which one of those two directions is easier for you. Which one feels more natural, which one feels more available. Good. And it can really be a small amount, just coming off where you feel naturally organized, just coming a little bit forwards and coming a little bit backwards. And just in doing that movement, bringing the weight forwards of the body, bringing the weight backwards of the body, you can get some sense in yourself which of those two is more comfortable for you, more recognizable, something that you do more readily than the other option. Good. Now take a rest. And what I'd like you to do is just see if you can sit in a position where your weight is over on the left side of your body. So for me, one of my nice habitual ones is to lean on the side of a sofa. So you could just, take your weight over to the side so that more of your weight is organized down over your left sitting bone. And then a few times again in that position, see if you can just very gently rock your weight slightly backwards and rock your weight slightly forwards. So the position of the pelvis is tilted slightly backwards first and then slightly forwards, just off center. And feel as you do that movement, which of those do you recognize as more habitual to you? The interesting thing is, as we go over to the right side, it may be a different one, so that you may feel that you tilt your pelvis backwards more on the left side of your body, and that you tilt your pelvis forwards more on the right side of the body. It can be that specific. So as you bring your weight over to the left and you tilt your pelvis backwards maybe a few times first, and then tilt your pelvis forwards a few times, just to sense like which one of those two options feels for you the more available. Good. And then come back to the middle. Take a little rest in the middle. When you've taken a little rest, just to breathe and to take your time to kind of settle into what we've been doing, take your weight over to the right in some way. Again, as I said, one of my favorite positions is kind of coming over to the edge of a sofa and leaning on one side of my body. If you can organize yourself in some way to do that, and then just very gently begin to tilt the pelvis backwards a few times so that you rock the weight of the body slightly backwards on the pelvis. And then once you've done that, tilt the pelvis forwards a few times. And see, as you bring your weight over to the right side of your body, which of those two options is more habitual or more more comfortable, feels nicer. So hopefully you're building up a picture as you do this. It's like learning about what you do. And that's a really important thing. So the more we know what we do, the more we develop choice about the process. If we don't know what we're doing habitually, it's actually more difficult to have choice. I'm sure I can explain that better. Um, so as you sense what the choices you're already making, as you sense those, then it gives you some degree of being able to stop that process and maybe choose something else. If you don't know what you're already choosing, then it's very difficult for you to stop that process. You can't inhibit that action in yourself if you don't know you're doing it. Good. Okay, so then just come back to a middle position. And in this middle position, tilt the pelvis backwards a few times and tilt the pelvis forwards a few times. And just feel how that feels now. Has it changed from when you first did it? And maybe you can feel your breathing as you do this now. As you tilt your pelvis, do you breathe in or breathe out? As you tilt your pelvis forwards, do you breathe in or breathe out? As you tilt your pelvis backwards, do you breathe in or breathe out? And one of the things that you can notice as you're tilting your pelvis is this sense of contact on the chair beneath you across your sitting bones. So that as you're tilting your pelvis slightly backwards, you can feel the weight moving across the sitting bone to the back edge of the sitting bone. And as you tilt your pelvis slightly forwards, the same thing, you can feel the weight or the contact between the chair changing so that the contact is more towards the front of the sitting bone. So really as if you're kind of rolling over something, rolling the pelvis slightly forwards, rolling the pelvis slightly backwards. And again, notice which of the two options, backwards or forwards, feels more normal to you. Normal is a good word. Good. So one of the requests that I had was to do with maybe doing some lessons in lying down. And I think I will move on to doing some lessons in lying down after this series of 50 lessons that I've done. And I think I'll probably decrease the intensity of them. So I wouldn't be doing one every day, but maybe to provide some opportunity for learning in a different situation. So far at the beginning of lockdown, I did 50 lessons on breathing. In the last few months, I've done lessons in sitting to do with moving the body. And this obviously is one of those. And then maybe next, we're going to move on to doing some lessons in lying down, which hopefully will provide a little bit of contrast from the stuff that we've been doing already. So what I'd like you to do now is again, sit back in your chair, sit back in your chair. And without doing anything, just close your eyes and feel your breathing as you sit back. So really see if you can kind of, for me, I'd take my legs up. I'd sit in this really comfortable backwards position. You could lean against the back of the chair and just notice your breathing in that position. Is the in-breath more available to you than the out-breath, or the out-breath more available to you than the in-breath? Or which side of the breath feels more comfortable to you? And very gently, very slowly, with your eyes closed, just see if you can tilt your pelvis a few times backwards, a tiny bit more in that position. Once you've done that a few times, tilt the pelvis slightly forwards. And notice your breathing as you do it. So we're going to slow down a little. I really want you to feel that, in this position that you're organized in, there is a position that you will habitually go to. And then as you change the weight across the pelvis, maybe it creates the different choices, different options that you've got available to you. And maybe you might experience that one of those options of tilting the pelvis slightly more backwards or slightly more forwards would actually feel more comfortable than the one that you chose habitually. And you may not. It may be that the one that you chose initially was the most comfortable. But just to explore what options your pelvis has in these positions, I think is a really useful skill. Good. Keep feeling your breathing as you make that movement, taking your pelvis slightly backwards, taking it slightly forwards. And maybe you notice as you do that in this position that there's a propensity to do more on one side of the pelvis than the other. You can feel a sense of unequalness from one side to the other. The right side of the pelvis maybe moves more than the left side of the pelvis, or vice versa. Good. And then come back to the middle position. So you're on your sitting bones. And again, just breathe in and breathe out a few times with your eyes closed. And notice, does the sense of breathing take you off that middle position? Does the in-breath mean that you rock on your sitting bones slightly forwards and the out-breath slightly backwards, or vice versa? Can you feel some sense of movement of your body just by breathing? Maybe you feel the muscles of the abdomen as you breathe in and breathe out, and how they affect this position that you're sitting in. And can you allow, or can you what's the word, exaggerate or extenuate the movement that you're already making with your breathing? So for example, if you rock slightly forwards as you breathe in, you just make a little effort to increase that sense. And if you rock your pelvis backwards as you breathe out, again, just making a little effort to increase the amount of movement that you're doing. So it's like you're going with the process of your own breath, but you're just bringing a tiny bit more movement than is naturally occurring. As you tie in the movement with the breath, maybe that makes you slow down a little. Maybe you start to kind of really tune into what's happening in your pelvis, the movement, the feeling of the breath. Good. And then lean forwards again. See if you can lean forwards as if to touch the floor. And in this position, and in the backwards position, and in the ones to the two sides, it's in some way that we are creating a constraint, or we're limiting the amount of movement that's possible. In order to get to this position, you have to organize yourself in a specific way. If you are not organizing yourself in that specific way, even getting to that point where you're reaching down to the floor can be very difficult. And this is something that some of the elderly people that I work with experience, is that it's actually very difficult for them to even touch their own feet, to tie their laces or pick something off the floor. So what you can gather from that is that there's some organization that they have in their own body that's restricting their ability to perform that activity. So if you can go as close to the available position as possible, so reaching down towards the floor, and very gently, very slowly begin breathing again. Notice if there's any, even if it's slight, any slight movement of the pelvis as you breathe in and you breathe out. Very gently rocking the pelvis forwards or backwards, just with the natural movement of the breath. And then see if you can exaggerate it a tiny amount, so that as you come to that position, as if you're reaching down into the floor, maybe you feel that your pelvis is organized in a specific way to help you achieve that. And then see if within that position there's any room for movement. Can you rock the pelvis a little more forwards or a little more backwards? And can you follow the process of your breath, so that as you breathe in or breathe out, the natural movement that you're already making, can you just exaggerate it a tiny amount? Good. Come back to a middle position, a neutral position. And just imagine that your pelvis is sitting on a clock. And the front of the clock, 12 o'clock is in front of you and 6 o'clock is behind you. And very gently, just take your pelvis back to 6 o'clock, forwards to 12 o'clock. And just see if you can really make that a very smooth movement, that you're not veering off. You're not going to, say, 1 o'clock or 11 o'clock, or you're not going backwards to 5 o'clock or 7 o'clock. You're really clear that you're doing the same amount of forwards movement on both sitting bones and the same amount of backwards movement on both sitting bones. One of the lessons that I did, that I remember doing from the Feldenkrais method, Moshe talked about this particular movement, where you're paying attention to a balanced movement backwards and forwards on the sitting bones. And this could be related to the feet being on the floor as well. That this actually is a very, very useful way of correcting postural habits like lordosis or kyphosis or scoliosis, because you've got this equal balanced movement backwards of the pelvis and forwards, that the spine is encouraged to move in its very natural way, the natural curves of the spine backwards and forwards, and it's not going off in different directions. So it has a kind of correctative element to it. Good. And again, let go of the movement and just feel your breathing in that position. Does your breathing very gently take you off from the middle, forwards or backwards? And can you notice that there's a difference in the height of your head as you rock your pelvis very gently, or allow the breathing to rock you very gently backwards and forwards? Is there a point in that process where your head is the tallest? And do you get shorter on either side of that point? Just try that movement a few times. Noticing the height of your head, noticing your breathing, a sense of balanced movement backwards and forwards of the pelvis. Okay, so I'm going to stop the lesson there, but what I'd encourage you to do, if you want, is maybe to stand up and do the movement in standing after the lesson, so that you can kind of take this into your upright life as well. So in standing, you could just tilt the pelvis slightly forwards and tilt the pelvis slightly backwards. Again, maybe after doing it a couple of times, stop, feel your breathing, feel if there's any movement of the pelvis naturally as you stand, as you breathe in and breathe out. And then you could try it in walking as well. So obviously in sitting, there's a various amount of a variety of amount of positions available to us. We could sit in any number of them. But throughout the day, maybe you need to reach a shelf above you, or you need to sit on your laptop on the computer, or you need to pick something up off the floor, whatever it is. See if you can bring some attention to the process. Notice where is a good organization for your pelvis to be in, or what is a good organization of your pelvis to be in for the activity that you're doing. So for example, reaching a shelf above you, if you were contracting the front of your body and taking your pelvis backwards at the same time as reaching up, maybe that's not going to get you up to the top shelf. So yeah, just something to think about. If you have anything to report back after today, you want to put them in the comments, I'd be grateful. Again, I'm teaching a Feldenkrais class, hour-long Feldenkrais class this evening, 8 p.m. UK time. Those are great lessons. I'd really encourage you, if you haven't done a full hour-long Feldenkrais class, to come and give them a try. It's a really nice group of people as well, very interested in looking at these things, and yeah, it's a really nice group. And I will be teaching the rest of this week, 11 o'clock in the morning. And then when I get to 50 lessons, I'm probably going to move across to doing some lying down lessons as well. So yeah, hopefully that's interesting for everyone. Again, if you want to watch any previous lessons, they're in there's a link in the description to my community group. There's also a link to PayPal if you'd like to make a small contribution to myself for providing these lessons. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed it. Hope you feel that you've got more options in your pelvis after that. And I hope you enjoy that throughout the rest of the day. Okay, take care. Have a good Monday.